Right, okay. I'm going to try and take you through the Tyger as quickly as possible. Um, as a sort of brief overview, the poem really focuses on the power of God and explores sort of the existence of evil and danger in the world. It takes a form of a string of questions that all serve to, probe and challenge and question the nature of God in creation, ultimately asking the question whether it could be this, how could the same God possibly have created the tiger, a symbol of evil, potential danger, harm? Uh, how could the same God have created that and a lamb, obviously a symbol of innocence? Uh, so, in a sense, the tiger in the poem becomes a symbol of one of religion's most difficult questions. Why would any God allow evil to exist? It doesn't reach any questions, answers or solutions. It just poses the question. The poem, although I said the tiger is a symbol of violence and evil, it also marvels, I think, at the tiger and its fearsome power, and therefore, by extension, also marvels at the power of God and nature. There's a real sense of awe in the poem. Anyway, let's read it, and I'll go through my annotations. So, the tiger. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what a mortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what a mortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? So, let's start with the title. Pretty simple and straightforward. It's called The Tyger. I've suggested here that the use of the as a definite article lends the tiger a sense of boldness. It gives it a presence and a power. I also think maybe the use of the definite article, the, sort of makes it clear that we're not actually talking about a tiger, we're talking about the concept of a tiger and what it represents and how it functions as a symbol. And like I said in the little sort of introduction, I think the tiger functions as a symbol essentially of violence and evil, the existence of evil in the poem. So it starts, you'll see all the way through, there's a real sort of insistent, urgent rhythm and quality to the poem. One of the ways in which that is created is through the choice of sounds. And the first stanza is a good example of that. You can see there's lots of plosives, the B's, there's fricatives with the F's, and it just lends the reading of the poem a forcefulness, a bluntness that I think captures the destructive power and potential of the tiger and everything that it represents. Something you'll also notice that is dotted throughout the poem is images or words that are associated with fire. So obviously we know that fire can be destructive and horrendous, but it's also something that's really beautiful. And I think that, like I said at the start, although the poem explores the tiger as something that's evil and dangerous, it also marvels at it. And so despite it being dangerous and destructive, it's also a source of beauty. And the poem sort of explores the idea that these two different qualities can coexist alongside one another. The reference in the third line to the immortal hand or eye is our first real focus on the idea of the divine. And I think the poem really is the nature of the divine is being questioned. So if you come down here when it lines 19 and 20, you can see like this is the I suppose the central two questions in the poem, or the central question in the poem. Did the person who made the tiger also make the lamb? So there's this sense of like just absolutely incredulous at the idea that a creator could do this, and it's asking what type of a entity is this creator? Like, did it take pride and pleasure in the creation of evil? If so, what kind of a god is it? So yeah, like I said, I think the poem really the string of questions all basically are used to articulate one single idea: what kind of a god created this world? I'll work through the poem. You can see there's loads of, like I said earlier, there's loads of alliteration. You can keep looking at that as one of the mechanisms through which this driving assistant rhythm is created. I think there's a nice little bit of repetition here on lines 7 and 8. The dare, repetition really sort of picking that out and emphasizing the idea that this God could potentially be a reckless one, or is he a brave one? Is it a foolish one? I suppose when somebody dares to do something, there's a fine line between bravery and recklessness and foolishness. So again, it's questioning the nature of the divine and the creator. Anaphora is used throughout the poem. As you can see at the starts of these lines, there's lots of what's, and it's used internally as well. Just that constant repetition of what, which again is a nice feature of form, a structure that you could argue lends the poem this fast-paced beat that reflects the power of the tiger, but also the creator. Okay, moving down to here. This is like a little odd allusion and reference that I had to look up. But apparently, this is a Christian reference to the creation of the universe when God, I don't know, defeated the rebel angels. It's a reference to that. So it's all about the beginning of time, the beginning of the universe. So it's focusing us on that creative process. We've talked about the lamb being a symbol of innocence, so this idea of contrasting with the tiger, exploring the idea of this coexistence, simultaneously existing at the same time, evil and good, in innocence, experiencing innocence, good and evil. I think one of the interesting features of the poem that you could pick out when talking about form is the fact that the first and the last stanza are almost identical, which shows that ultimately that the tiger remains an enigma throughout. There are no answers to the questions. We don't get any closer to knowing what kind of a god created the tiger, etc. So ultimately the tiger remains an enigma, as does God. But there is one significant change. That could in the first stanza becomes dare in the final stanza. So the questioner has learnt something, in that they've moved towards an understanding that God is fearless and reckless, and I don't know. It's more subjective, isn't it? It's not as neutral as the word could. I think dare carries certain connotations. I think Blake is implying something about the nature of the creator, that they dare do something recklessly, or perhaps. So just to finish off, those would be the themes that I would pick out: power, existence of evil, the nature of God as being central to the poem. Some nice little form points. I've talked about the string of questions. There's obviously this insistent, urgent beat throughout. I think it's trochaic. Is that? I'm not sure that's how you say it. Trochaic meter, but it's regular and it's fast paced, and it really captures this idea of a blacksmith at work, sort of, with the hammer at the anvil, which is really the central image of the creator. This idea that with a furnace at the anvil, with his hammer, like creating and forging something. So I think the beat and the rhythm of the poem helps to highlight that idea. And like I said, ultimately, that there is what Blake is exploring. There's this central religious dilemma. I don't think it's just Christian. Why did God create evil? What kind of a God are they? But of course, it doesn't reach any solutions. It just leaves those questions hanging in the air for more consideration.